thecreative.corporate.com proudly presents The Creative, Not Corporate Pop Culture and Media Podcast, chronicling the ongoing pop culture battle between the creative minds of music, movies, TV, and radio, and the corporate suits that control them. Now please welcome your host, a digital media professional with over 25 years experience in all forms of traditional and digital media, not to mention managing two of the largest online radio podcast networks on earth. Here is the king of podcasts.
Welcome back to Creative Not Corporate. KOP here with you. Thanks for being here. A lot of things to go into, some radio stuff. I am chomping at the bit to talk about tonight, plus a little bit of movie news. Some remakes I'm really scared, well, at least one remake I'm very scared of happening. A review of Action Point, which there wasn't much call to action to it. A quick tribute to the Americans finale from last week. The best of 2018 on television. And a story I got to talk about. Top 40 Radio has a rap problem. And that's going to be a story I'm going to really stick into. But I'm going to get to that in a few minutes. But first, let me go ahead and scroll back and go through a couple of the things that are going on. Start with movies. So there's been talk. Of course, there's always talk of certain movies being brought back and resurrected. And one of the movies I saw that was just being brought up is, oh God, help us, The Cannonball Run. So Edge of director Doug Liman is in early talks to take over the directing reins of the reboot of Warner Brothers' The Cannonball Run. It was a 1980s action comedy franchise made popular by star Burt Reynolds and director Hal Needham. Now, if you didn't know, The Cannonball Run originally in 1981 was a huge summertime hit. $72 million in the box office for 1981 standards. You had an all-star cast. Burt Reynolds, Farrah Fawcett, Roger Moore, James Bond, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., Dom DeLuise, among others. Great cameos. It was just, what a funny movie. And they just don't make them like that anymore. And you just can't get those guys together having such a great time doing a movie like that. It was just something else. But anyways, but the director has quite a bit of clout because he did Edge of Tomorrow. He directed The Bourne Identity, and he directed Mr. and Mrs. Smith. So over $1.5 billion in the box office. I'm just curious who they would pick to go ahead and do these roles. Now, if you didn't know, there were 3 versions of the movie. They actually had a sequel, which was not as good. It was okay. And then they had, that was the one that included the entire Rat Pack. That was Frank Sinatra joining Sammy Davis Jr. and Dean Martin. So Peter Lawford was not part of that one. But the last incarnation of the Rat Pack getting together on anything was that. I mean, it's been 37 years. They could do it. It's nothing new. And they also did a film in 1989. It was Orion Pictures that did it with a lot of people from the SCTV group, Second City. John Candy, Donna Dixon, Eugene Levy, and Brooke Shields. Wasn't that good. It was also in a cold climate. It just did look bad. It looked very low-ballish. But that's the idea. And the last movie that kind of had this all-star cast kind of deal, because they don't do them a lot like this. Mars Attacks was a real all-star cast. Rat Race was an all-star cast. If you're talking about classic ones like that, there's, it's a mad world, things like that. But it's really tough to get that kind of a group together on a funny movie. That's tough. Just saying. And as for the box office this week, Solo is struggling badly. So far, this past weekend, $29 million, 148 million gross domestically. Deadpool comes in with 23.1 million in its second week, and it's definitely a runaway hit. $254 million domestically out of a $110 million budget. Adrift comes in third. Shailene Woodley stuck on a boat in the middle of nowhere, and that was $11 million they made out of a $35 million budget. If it's going to make it back, it's going to struggle. Avengers Infinity War, in its 6th week, number 4 in the box office, $643 million made domestically. Definitely going to probably hit the $2 billion mark. Book Club is 5th, $47.5 million total in the last few weeks, $7 million this week. And then the movie I saw, Action Point, was 9th. Now, yes, it wasn't as many theaters, and half the theaters of Solo or Deadpool only pulled in $2.3 million and $19 million budget. Yeah, that was, let me tell you about Action Point. So they were trying to go the bad grandpa route again. This movie did not include the entire Jackass cast. Chris Pontius is the only guy that was around from the original Jackass crew. So no Ryan Dunn, obviously. No Steve-O. And no Bam Margera. We know how there's a lot of things that happen. Obviously, we can't get that group together again. We lost one of them. One of them is truly, I don't think is ever going to be able to make it, will never make his way back into that crew again. So, I mean, Johnny Knoxville gets a chance to put a movie like this together. I think it was better set for Netflix. I thought the daughter character, the one they called Boogie, was endearing. The story, it was a story, and it was fine, but it wasn't overly funny. It definitely had the feelings of like a Meatballs 1970s campy kind of comedy. Kind of a dazed and confused kind of feel to it. You didn't know what time period it was. I was guessing it was either the late 70s, early 80s. But there wasn't much to the context. They loosely put a plot together. They gave you it was fine. You could definitely watch it on DVD. Would definitely not recommend going to the theater to watch it. It's a C, a straight C, about as much as I can give it. It was flat. I mean, there were some funny parts. You did get some stunts, but it was just kind of there. It's just where it was. And as we talked about Solo struggling still, could be one of the first movies that falls badly as part of things for Disney putting this together. And it was a budget of at least $250 million. It's probably not going to gross more than $400 million. So it's a hit to Disney that one of the Star Wars movies did not do so well. Rogue One, a Star Wars story, which was not part of the Star Wars trilogy, the Star Wars storyline, at least got $1 billion. Star Wars Last Jedi got $1.3 billion. So seeing this happen here, struggling, is bad. $148 million so far domestically as of Sunday. 264 million total international. Not good. It did not play well to everyone overseas. It did not play well there. It did not do that well in America. It fell apart. And you could tell that all the issues they had with the showrunner, not the showrunner, with the director, the change of things, I guess, the storyline, was salvaged. So it does come back and get a bit of a profit, but not even close to the profit that Disney would want. So they're going to come back and recollect on this, and they're going to really, it's going to be a lot of things questioned about it. All right. The Americans. Now, it's already been a week, so I feel bad I can't talk about it too much right now, but for most part, people didn't really give too much said about what they thought about it. There were not a lot of people really said they felt really disappointed by it. From what I basically saw of everyone, they actually felt pretty good about it. Questions were left. I was surprised to see that Philip and Elizabeth were able to escape. I mean, the two moments in that show of the finale was the confrontation in the garage with Stan Beeman and the family having to finally give it up. The shocker of Philip saying to Stan, I don't know what the best way to tell you this, but we might think your wife is one too. We're not sure. So you have that to throw on him. Stan Beeman stands by the family after all was said and done and lets them slide reluctantly. And then after all the lies that Paige went through with her mom and with her parents in general, she almost went along and left to leave to Russia. But since she wasn't really had done anything necessarily wrong, I mean, she felt like she wanted to depose of this family. It was all a lie. It was just, they might have been her parents, but she wasn't ready to continue this. She just felt like she was dealing with a bunch of liars, and she felt better off leaving them behind. And the way they did it was so well done. Shocking. Very well done. But everything they did with that show, it was a nice wrap around. Kind of a happy ending, surprising, but not surprising because it was not happy for Philip and Elizabeth. They lost the kids altogether. So what else are they left with? They're back in Russia now, where things are miserable. And who knows what kind of life they're going to live. But, I mean, it's the sacrifice they made for their country, and they get nothing in return for it. But all in all, I enjoyed the series immensely. One of my favorites. Currently, right now, I'm going on Peaky Blinders. That's the movie, not the movie, but the TV show I'm actually catching up on right now. Almost done with season 1. Cillian Murphy, hell of an actor. Remember the first role I ever saw him, it was in Red Eye with Rachel McAdams, the airplane movie, remember? A long time ago. But he's good. Hell of a cast, too. Hell of a cast. And so I'm hopefully going to get through that show pretty quickly. And if you have any suggestions on what shows I need to watch, I mean, it's going to be tough for me to kind of tell you what shows I've already seen and what I haven't. But, I mean, I've gone through a lot. But I'll leave it at that. Anything I absolutely must, I'll at least give you the heads up of what shows you might recommend to me. If you want to recommend them, go through my Twitter at King of Podcasts and hit me up there. Let me know, and I'll tell you if I've seen it or not. At least let you know what I think about it. Now, the best TV shows of 2018 so far, this is according to Variety. And I'll tell you what they're talking about. They say The Americans is one. Not being one of the best shows of the year, but best of the decade. Characters spent seasons pushing off inevitable conversations, finally forced to deal with the consequences of history and with the impossibility of the situation of spies living undercover. So, a hell of a job of that show. Next show they had was American Crime Story, the assassination of Gianni Versace. Absolutely yes on that. And every episode essentially acts as its own excruciating horror story, ripping up the tension to near unbearable degrees of serial killer Andrew Cunanan, as Rick Sanchez of Miami News fame and CNN fame would say. Cunanan, an electric Darren Criss, tears through victims. Series tells the very real, ugly, and undeniably recent history of homophobia in the United States, laying bare its cost and enduring consequences. The series can be very hard to watch, but its unrelenting gaze made for some of the year's best compelling television. Atlanta, of course, there's creator Donald Glover to put the show together, and all that goes with that show. Yeah, it's obviously coming back on FX, doing a lot. Season 2. So that's that. Barry is mentioned here. It's the show with Bill Hader on HBO where he plays a serial killer learning acting. High Maintenance on HBO. Then they mentioned Jane the Virgin on the CW, Killing Eve on BBC America, Mosaic on HBO, One Day at a Time on Netflix. and Schitt's Creek on Pop TV, Superstore on NBC, The Tale on HBO, Queer Eye on Netflix, Westworld on HBO, among others. But the first two they were right with on the top. I mean, it was American Horror Story. It was to be American Crime Story. God, it is like American Horror Story. It was just very well done. What a hell of a story they put. I mean, not the glorified Andrew Cunanan, but yeah, he was a piece of crap. All right. One more thing. I'm going to go into music and radio. I do have to bring up this one story about Spotify. According to adage.com, Spotify ends its divisive artist policy after a music industry revolt. So Spotify has rescinded the short-lived policy that penalized artists for misconduct, bowing the pressure from irate musicians and record labels. So they're no longer going to will still remove hate speech, according to a blog. This because they were starting to scrub R&B singer R. Kelly and rapper XXXTentacion from his playlists in an attempt to take a stand against sexual misconduct. But their issue is they're a publicly traded business, so for them to kind of start going, a little too authoritarian with their service, got some people up on a rift. So listen, Spotify just needs to watch themselves. They need to worry less about trying to filter out artists and their content, because what people care more about is dealing with the royalties that all these artists are deserving to get. So doing something like this is just going to start stoking the flames, and I think that's just a bad idea. Now, this is a story that caught me smack dab in the face. I was like, oh boy, if you want to talk about a CNC type story, this is why I needed this podcast, is to talk about this story from rollingstone.com. This is from Elias Late. This has made it around the radio industry roundup. A lot of people have read it. So let's talk about this, because it just goes right into the crux, right into the vortex of the issues I have with music radio, with mainstream radio today. So Top 40 radio has a rap problem. Kendrick Lamar, Cardi B, Amigos make the most popular records in the country. So why aren't they thriving on pop stations the way white rappers do? Now, of course, there's maybe a little of a racial component on this. That doesn't matter to me at all. As you know, me hosting this podcast, it's irrelevant. But there are points made on this which I will validate. Okay. Kanye West recently talked to Power 105.1, which is a very popular hip-hop station, Clear Channel owned in New York City. He talked to Charlamagne the God, which is one of the hosts of The Breakfast Club, a very popular morning show that goes on many urban radio stations around the country. He was talking to Charlamagne about the following. Quote, if you're an artist and you're signed to a major label, you want to be on the radio, especially if you're popular. Now, Kanye West has enjoyed the support of mainstream R&B and hip-hop radio for most of his 15-year recording career. Father Stretch My Hands Part 1, for example, was top 5 in the format in the fall of 2016. Pop radio has all but abandoned him. Although West once romped through top 40 with songs like Stronger in 2007, none of his last 3 albums have produced a major pop radio hit, though each went platinum. Quote, to put that same amount, if not more work, and you're used to it coming out like Graduation, where everything is everywhere, it's frustrating. End quote. This problem is not unique to Kanye West. Scan the last 6 years of Billboard's Pop Songs chart, which tracks pop radio spins. You'll quickly notice a pattern. Since the beginning of 2012, only one non-white rapper has been able to cross over from mainstream R&B, hip-hop, or urban radio and crown the chart. One Dance by Drake, which was a song that was, I forget how many weeks it was at number 1. It features minimal rapping. It's the case that pop radio has mysteriously turned against hip hop as a whole, which this is the validation of what I'm talking about. Now, before I continue on with this story, I have mentioned before on this program how if you listen to what America Top 40 was listening to back in the day, what songs they played, what charts were understood. When rap became a mainstream viable genre in the early 90s, in the late 80s, people just kind of just thought it was a fluke. Mainstream, it was brought up to the mainstream by MTV and through BET as well, to a lesser extent. But you had that, and you had TV that was playing it. I mean, Soul Train was featuring rap artists. You had a cable channel called The Box, or actually one not even on cable in some places. Some places it was on UHF, and you could actually pay for songs that you wanted to listen to, mostly rap songs, or mostly rock songs if you wanted to as well. But what happened was pop music decided to break off from its original top 40 format. It was not just because of rap, it was because of rock. And what happened was, in rock music, it wasn't controlled and it wasn't mainstream friendly like it was before. In the early 90s, we started hearing the grunge sound. We started hearing changes, right? I mean, Guns N' Roses was the last prominent act to have top 40 songs in rock in the late 80s, going into the 90s. Aerosmith as well. But then when Nirvana and Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, all these different groups started coming in, they were not going to get the same treatment in the mainstream on music radio. It wasn't. Instead, stations started to change. Ones that were a very rhythmic dance style format, they chose, well, we're going to take that audience. And then the genres began to formulate. And then stations would focus only on that. So you would have a dance rhythmic urban style station starting to play rap songs till eventually rap consumed the entire format. And then you had rap consumed 24 hours a day. Some stations started playing on Fridays and Saturdays as part of like a club mix. But then it became more and more, and rap was allowed to become, on certain urban stations, consuming the entire genre. And then through the 90s, you would at least have some R&B music mixed in with rap music. Now, R&B is a figment of imagination. Any new R&B music is basically left to the side. It's rare that anybody has a legitimate, straight up R&B record that makes it up to the top. Like right now, there's a song from LMA called "Boot Up." That's a traditional R&B song right there from the 90s. That's in that style. Melody, harmony, has a nice sound and beat to it, but you don't have that too much. And the urban stations are playing it. Pop radio's not. And that should be a pop-friendly song. But what happened was like we said, American Top 40, which has always been a gauge of what music radio, your top 40 radio stations played. They normally did use the Billboard Hot 100 as their stick as to counting the top 40 songs of the week. 1991, it changed. Then they went to Pop Airplay, which gave a better chance for rap and rock music to not make it onto the charts. It made it harder for those songs to make it to the charts. To the point that pop music now is so compartmentalized, and that's why you have a media base that now has all these genres so compacted and microscoped so that no wonder songs stay on the chart for 40, 50, 60 weeks. If it happens on the Hot 100, that means it's a legendary song that will get played forever and ever. What songs have you heard right now that are on the charts up to at least 40, 50 weeks. Well, anything from Imagine Dragons right now, which you're always going to hear that on mainstream radio forever. And a Hot AC forever. Ed Sheeran, Perfect, Shape of You, probably a lot. It'll happen. But there's less chance of songs getting changed out for new songs. But this is the way that the consultants want it. They want it to be this way. They wanted Top 40 Radio to turn into this. So they have complete authoritarian control. And they will now allow very little to break into that mainstream that could be very chilling. All right. When Drake has covered the last 16 weeks, and how many months have we had in this year? What about 24? And Drake has had the number one song for at least 16 of those 24 weeks. And you're struggling to hear Nice for What? Nice for What is being played on hip hop radio, on urban radio. Is it being played on Top 40 radio? I don't think so. If I go looking again on Media Base, I can guarantee you right now, they're not playing it. They're not. God's plan. American Top 40 did not put that song up on their chart until, 6 weeks ago? The song debuted in February, and it stayed up there for 11 weeks at number one. The song has been up there, 16 weeks now? 17 weeks? That song hasn't gotten any lower than number 3 on Billboard Hot 100. The song still has amazing viral power. And the fact that Billboard knew how to track the buzz. They knew how to track what we call viral today. But it took forever to get there, didn't it? Now, I'm going to go ahead and do another look real quick. While we're doing this, I'm going to look real quick and tell you what stations are playing what in the country. Currently, the Top 40 media-based chart, Drinking God's Plan, has only been on their chart for 10 weeks. It's now number 7. And as far as I know, I don't think it's ever gotten the number 1. Not even close. The Middle is your number 1 song right now on Media Basis Top 40. Now, what about the artists that are rappers? Post Malone, Psycho, that song is number 3. Currently number 2, or it's currently 4 right now on Billboard. In the top 10, that's it. Nobody else. If I go farther down, Weekend Kendrick Lamar, that song, number 12 this week. If I go through the rest of the top 40 on Media Base, Drake Nice for What comes in now at 19. Kendrick Lamar, All the Stars is 16. And then what else? Cardi B, and I Like It, that's 37. Well, actually, she's 30 this week. And then, Big Boy and All Night is 36, which is a song I don't even think it's been played on urban radio at all. So I don't even know where that's coming from. And Jeezy has a song called Sober with Charlie Puth at 37 this week. After that, nothing. Rap is irrelevant on this chart. If I look at Z100 out of New York City, the top 40 stations that get everything played first. Okay. If I look at their current chart right now, Post Malone and Psycho's number 1. The Middle's number 2. There will be the same 3. Haley Seinfeld and Let Me Go is 4. Tell Me Love Me is 5. Really? These are songs that have been off the chart for a while. They're not even on here for months. And is there anything rap related on here at all? Top 40? This is America is landed now on 37. But it's only getting 18 spins total for the week. And then Drake Nice for 21 spins, number 31 this week. That's it. And let me give you another station. This is Kiss FM out of Los Angeles. Ryan Seacrest's station. And if I look at his 7-day playlist, you will see not much better, I'm pretty sure. Let me show you the 7-day. Let me talk about the 7-day list of theirs. Post Malone, Psycho, number 1. All the Stars, number 2. Pray For Me, number 3. So Kendrick Lamar is up there twice. Other than that, I keep going down. Drake, God's Plan is number 20. Number 19 is Nice for What? And F Let You Down is 21. I guess we count him. Post Malone, another song, Better Now, 28. And Post Malone, one more song, Rockstar, which has been on for forever, is 40. That's it. So these are the top 40 radio stations. If you heard these stations before, they wouldn't have had any issues with any. And by the way, no rock on here. None whatsoever. Unless you count Imagine Dragons and Portugal the Man. That's it. That is all. It's so homogenized. It's so scrubbed down. So, yeah, rap is not part of it, but rock is not also either. Rock is, and that's the one thing. Why does anybody want to get into rock music when you can't even get in the mainstream right now? Man, I looked at who's out there now in rock radio on the charts. When I looked at Billboard's hot rock songs, Arctic Monkeys has a new album. That they've been around for a long time, right? Imagine Dragons holds the top 3 songs on that chart, and that's it. Now, I digress back to the story. So during the 6 years we've just mentioned, white rappers have repeatedly scored pop number 1s. Twice for Macklemore. Twice for Eminem and Iggy Azalea. Machine Gun Kelly and Jeezy have each scored twice with number 1s. Aside from Drake, the only non-white rappers to reach number 1 in this format in recent years have done it by collaborating with the latest pop act. Kendrick Lamar has done it with Taylor Swift and Maroon 5, or made a record that's so far from the sound of mainstream hip-hop that rap radio wouldn't touch it. That's Flo Rida's My House. Now, Tom Pullman, who's the chief programming officer of iHeartMedia, describes the top 40 ethos as just playing what's hot. And even though J. Cole's Deja Vu features Mask Off, Lamar's DNA, Lil Uzi Vert's EXO Tour Lil Life 3, I don't know how you pronounce that song, Little Pump's Gucci Gang, and Migos' Motorsport were all top 10 hits on the Billboard Hot 100, which measures total cross-platform consumption, including streaming sales and radio play. None of them made a dent in Billboard's pop airplay ranking. Migos' Bad and Bougie, which was the number 1 song. Lamar's Humble, number 1 song. Bodak Yellow were number 1 songs in the Hot 100 last year. They didn't even get enough radio play to enter the top 20 on Billboard's pop songs chart. It's probably unreasonable to expect top 40 stations to act as a progressive force in the music industry. But presumably, it's not even a matter about being progressive. It's about being a representation of what is hot, like you said. The songs that are meant to be played, that people are listening to. You're choosing a playlist that's of your own, censored. It's not so much of being about being aggressive, it's censoring what songs people want to hear. There's nothing wrong with you cleaning up songs and getting rid of any kind of language, of course. But that doesn't mean you censor the content altogether. If that's a song that people are going to ask for, and you just choose not to play it because the consultant says, "Oh, it's just not friendly. It's not friendly for advertisers." Well, who do you think your audience is going to support if they don't hear their songs on the radio? They're not going to come to you. Again, this is why they're going to Spotify or Pandora or Apple or what have you. They're leaving for streaming because you're not choosing them. No wonder stations want to go ahead and placate to the older audience. So radio is doing a foul job of bringing back listeners, of bringing in new listeners. Those listeners are going away. So the new crop of radio supporters are going by the wayside. They're going to streaming. And it's no other person's fault but their own. Now, perhaps it's reasonable unexpected that they should be progressive top 40 radio we're talking about. But presumably they are interested in making money by playing popular songs. So it's startling at this moment, while hip-hop is utterly dominant, hits from the non-white rappers who remain of the genre's creative and commercial vanguard are so absent. But remember, this is not even just about white rappers. It's just rap in general. They're absent. Intentionally or otherwise, Top 40 Radio has seemingly adjusted to the ascendancy of hip-hop by creating an alternate ecosystem in which the rules that govern the rest of the music business do not apply. The modern system of radio format, and this is more context, but this is important. The modern system of radio formats dates back to the late 70s and early 80s. This is according to Eric Weisbard. He's an associate professor at the University of Alabama, author of Top 40 of Democracy, the rival mainstreams of American music. As radio listening started to migrate from AM to FM, quote, instead of just having one top 40 format for all the hits, you started to have several formats representing different kinds of audiences that radio stations wanted to target. Radio is deceptive. It's not selling music to listeners. It's selling listeners to advertisers, end quote. In the case of Top 40, radio is marketing a very specific niche to those advertisers. What a programmer, according to Weisbard, of a Top 40 radio station imagines is that the ideal listener is a mom in her car with her daughter. That's a stereotype in the industry, end quote. The interplay between radio formats has fluctuated over time, and the racial compositions of the singers on Top 40 stations. Famous examples include Z100 in New York, Kiss FM in LA, and B96 in Chicago, moves accordingly. There were moments where Top 40 seemed very white, and Weisbard was pointing to the post-disco, pre-Michael Jackson moment in the 80s, which was what, 1980, 81, 82. Yes. This is where Lee Abrams and the types like that were starting to program stations where there was backlash from disco, and rock was being put aside because Top 40 radio started becoming very old, very much consumed with ballads, and they were trying to change direction altogether. And consultants started coming in. The beginning of the crumble of what was great radio. It started then. And also the late 2000s era of Turbo Club singles. On the flip side, he notes that the pre-Beatles 60s and early 2000s were moments where pop radio played multiple records by non-white performers. Remember when all those black artists, when you had, Nicki Minaj, and Lil Wayne, and all these others, you started hearing a lot of songs that were being done where all these dance DJs, Rihanna working with Calvin Harris, or David Guetta working with Nicki Minaj, right? You had dance artists working alongside hip-hop artists. It was all coming into that. And those songs started getting to be prominently played on the radio on Top 40. Many songs like that. Historically, a programming director's decision to put a record into rotation has depended on her personal preferences and the reactions of both listeners and advertisers. But even before preferences come into play, though, programmers aren't picking from a hat that contains every possible single. Major label promotional efforts have a large impact on the pool of songs that end up on a radio playlist. Sean Ross, a radio business veteran, quote, says, if a record's not being promoted to a certain format, you can pretty much at this point count on radio not taking the initiative, which is absolutely true, end quote. Reza Serafian spent more than a decade working urban promotions at Interscope Records. Talking about at every single meeting, there was always a struggle. He felt, why the F can't you guys over at Top 40 Promotion work on my records that I've got number one on urban? Labels have been too slow to understand the value of rap, he adds. And then we had the issue of internet piracy rising in the 2000s, hurting the official sales of hip-hop relative to pop. Labels saw iTunes selling more top 40, while urban music was being stolen peer-to-peer or distributed via hugely popular but royalty-free mixtapes. And that has changed dramatically in the streaming era. So Lil Uzi Vert's EXO Tour Life, for example, was certified 6 times platinum. It's not clear that labels have changed their behavior when it comes to radio. But it's that fact that the song was never pushed on pop radio. Even though the song made it prominently up past the top 20, I believe it was a top 10 song on the Hot 100 last year. So promotions didn't make the approach because they tried it with another rapper. The result has been the same all the time. So promotions doesn't work to the radio stations. Because the promotions, they can listen to music, they can talk to music directors till they're blue in the face, or program directors. But program directors and music directors have no autonomy. They don't have control. They're controlled by consultants. A handful of consultants, they handle all the radio stations in the country. The prominent ones. So Anthony Saleh, he manages Future, said his team tried pushing the song Mask off the pop radio, but it hit an immediate wall. And there was real money put on promotion, but it didn't work. Pop radio doesn't support us. And that's in part, and this is where the validation of what I've been talking about since the beginning of this program comes into play. The giant conglomerates that dominate American radio, thank you, Rolling Stone, for writing this actually in a story. But American radio have their own incentives to keep artists within their format of origin. Consolidation started after the Telecommunications Act of 1996, when the two largest radio group owners owned 62 and 53 stations, respectively. iHeartMedia now owns 858 radio stations. Cumulus Media, 445. Entercom, more than 230. This is from Nick Petropoulos, who handles promotion for Glassnote Records. Quote, say there's a radio group owner in a specific market, and they program the pop station, the urban station, and the alternative station. That group owner wants to have separation between each station. Otherwise, some of the radio industry argued they'd be all competing for the same listeners rather than reaching as many distinct listeners as possible. At the same time, market research has led top 40 playlists to become increasingly narrow, making each slot on a given station more competitive. There are fewer and fewer spaces, Petropoulos points out. Programmers are holding on the records longer because their research dictates that. So the circular logic is pop programmers don't want to use one of the few slots on a rap record that they see as unlikely to connect. Meaning that pop listeners don't hear that record enough for it to gain traction. J.J. Ryan, a program director for iHeartMedia in Oklahoma City, says, quote, you're talking about, for the most part, two totally different listening audiences. We're not normally quick on rhythmic records. They take a long time to catch on. End quote. So Gucci Gang never made it to regular rotation in Oklahoma City. Bad and Bougie wasn't even promoted to Ryan's station. Lamar's Humble didn't take off for our pop audience. We haven't seen a huge splash from him. And neither did Bodak Yellow. Quote, Ryan says, we wanted to play it because it was an event record, but it was one of those songs that for pop radio would hang around for a long time. Nothing against the sound, it's a tight format. End quote. So the tightness of the format that iHeartMedia is talking about is less about the person and more about the song. The idea of a commercial radio is, as a utopian meritocracy, is hard to take on face value, but it doesn't hurt to try. According to this line of thinking, the hip-hop records that recently crowned the top 40 by Machine Gun Kelly, Jeezy, and NF did so because they are power ballads that happen to include rapping. Jeezy's two top 40 number one songs have a big melodic part that's really easy to repeat. When aiming for the upper echelons of pop radio, Jeezy and Machine Gun Kelly have also worked with female collaborators with experience in the format. So, Jeezy working with Halsey and BB Rexa, Machine Gun Kelly working with Camila Cabello. But if sonic choices are the only factor in top 40 play, it's hard to explain why just a handful of non-white actors of any genre, Rihanna, Bruno Mars, The Weeknd, Jason Derulo, Flo Rida, appear regularly in the format. Even Beyonce hasn't been the lead artist on a top 10 pop radio hit since 2009. And she's released plenty of ballads during that time. Kendrick Lamar's song Love, a melodic ballad co-produced by top 40 savant Greg Kurstin, who's worked with such artists as Adele and Sia, was not a runaway smash on pop radio. Neither was Future's Selfish, which was another pop-friendly ballad with top 40 stalwart Rihanna. And the rapper's team tried to push hard to pop radio into some parts about racial bias, which I'm not going to go and deal into. So Drake's God's Plan, which is one of our most current examples, spent 11 weeks at number 1 on the Hot 100 before it became a top 10 record on pop radio. And just now, 4 months later. The top 10 slot isn't just a secondary prize after a streaming-driven run up the chart. Even in the streaming era, a rapper can still benefit from pop radio support. A recent Nielsen survey found that radio play is still the most common way for listeners to find new music. So Top 40 does help get artists to arenas and get them to the Grammys. But as Top 40 consistently ignores the most popular records in the country, that's what Casey Kasem used to talk about. He played the most popular records in the country. The Billboard Hot 100 features the most popular records in the country. That's what Top 40 radio was meant to be. That's what Bill Drake and Todd Stores and all those legendary Top 40 programmers, they didn't expect this to happen. Nobody asked for this. They would roll in their graves that this is what they found out. This is what these radio stations now play. According to data from MediaBase, which tracks radio play, Taylor Swift's pop radio number 1, Look What You Made Me Do, reached an impressive 900 million listeners to the airwaves. Kendrick Lamar's Humble topped out at number 26 in terms of pop radio, but other formats, notably heavy support from mainstream R&B and hip-hop radio, Lamar reached to more than 2 million people without Top 40 radio. These millions might not have included many proverbial mother-daughter Top 40 listeners in places like Oklahoma City, but it's a temporary setback for non-white rappers. Whether you're going to see Migos on ESPN on Saturday Night Live, the music's going to get out there regardless. Moms are going to get in the car and want to hear those songs too. I was very fascinated by that story. I couldn't believe they actually called it out. Now, they were using it more of a racial tip, but I didn't care about that slant. That wasn't important to me. It was the fact of what, in general, mainstream radio does wrong. And I will continue on this bully pulpit of a podcast I have until there is change, because this is something that was very important to me when I started this show. Now, I talk about other media as well because I have the same kind of passion for it. But radio is something that I wish is one of the easiest places for things in pop culture to get better, to get started. There's so much inventory, so much time, so much talent that comes from radio that can work their way up. There is. So we have to hope that local radio makes its day, that something happens to all these different equity firms that are holding on and hemorrhaging debt out of companies like Cumulus and Entercom and iHeartMedia, and they'll go away. And something might actually happen good. We can only hope. We can only hope. Anyway, that's the show for this week. Thanks for tuning in. Keep creative as far away from your corporate as you can. Thank you guys. I'm out.
Thank you for listening to the Creative, Not Corporate Pop Culture and Media Podcast. To learn where to subscribe to the show and how to follow the King of Podcasts anywhere on social media, go to our website at creativenotcorporate.com. That's creativenotcorporate.com. The Creative Not Corporate Podcast is brought to you by Amazon. Shop where the King of Podcasts shops for everything and anything he needs by going to kingofpodcasts.com/Amazon. Also, check out the King of Podcasts' work every day at webmasterradio.fm and cannabisradio.com. And look for his other original podcast series, The Wrestling is Real Podcast. Learn about these and more at kingofpodcasts.com.